Hi everyone, welcome to the last lecture of the semester. Thanks for bearing with my absences and dealing with this online format. Today we are talking about measurement in health behavior programs. We have a number of objectives to achieve throughout this class. All of them pertain to learning what behavioral measurement is and how to do it. I do also want you guys to take a minute to think about the evaluation lectures we've had in the previous 2 weeks and kind of quiz yourselves. Do you know the 2 purposes of evaluation and the 4 different types of evaluation and 5 terms? At this point, I hope that you do, and if you don't, please let me know if you have any questions. So today we're talking about what we're actually measuring when we're talking about the different evaluation strategies. So we've talked about impact outcomes and impact objectives. So you may remember that one of the types of impact objectives and outcomes was behavioral changes. In behavior measurement, we have 3 different angles that we can approach the topic. The first one is talking about adopting a new behavior or starting a new behavior. So we often look at things like eating new foods, starting an exercise program, taking preventive measures such as using condoms, wearing a helmet, or protective gear. The second angle that we take when talking about behavior is stopping or quitting an old behavior. So maybe stopping smoking or using drugs or stopping unhealthy eating. So sometimes these 2 angles can be the same or 2 sides of the same coin. And then the third angle we talk about when we talk about behavior is maintaining a behavior. So adhering to a treatment, continuing to adhere to a treatment or an exercise routine or something that you're doing good. So there are a couple different pieces of behavioral measurement and a couple different steps that you have to go through. So the first one is defining your variable. So if you don't have a really specific definition of what your behavior is, it's really difficult to measure and to determine whether it has been achieved. So this is kind of similar to when we're talking about writing objectives. They need to be SMART objectives. You also, to a certain extent, need to have a SMART definition of your behavior. The second step to behavioral measurement is determining what others have done before you. So this is typically the first step that we take when we are planning a new study or planning a new program and planning the evaluation for it. We want to see how our behavior has been measured in the past. But the trick is being able to critically evaluate the previous literature to see if you agree with how the behavior has been measured in the past or if there are any known errors in that measurement tool. But when you are selecting a method of behavioral measurement, you want to make sure that the method has been really well described so there's no mystery as to how to measure the behavior. It needs to be reproducible. And also, when you are selecting a method, whether you're using a previously developed method or you are creating your own, you need to take care to make your known error known. And what I mean by that is, if you know that there's a particular limitation to the tool or the definition of behavior that you're using, you need to make sure that when you publish your results or you're telling people about your methods, that you let other people know, and instead of marketing it as this perfect tool or just kind of brushing the limitations under the rug. So an example of that might be if you are using a particular survey. So I've done this before where there was a word on the survey. I asked people, I used the word relevant in my survey, and I found out later that my population didn't understand what the word relevant meant. And so I needed to make sure when I was reporting the results of my study that I let people know that there was this error in my measurement tool, in my survey or my scale item, that caused my participants to interpret the instructions a little bit differently than how I hoped. And so I'm warning people that the same thing might happen to them. So down here. When we're talking about the importance of selecting a good measurement tool and making your error known, we're really talking about what can go wrong when you measure something poorly. So what happens when you are using an instrument or a definition of a behavior that is not totally accurate? This decreases your ability to detect changes in the behavior, or statistically we call it decreases your power. So it limits your ability statistically after your study to show whether changes in behavior have occurred or not, because there's maybe this flaw in your measurement technique. It also reduces validity. So we're going to talk about validity at the end of this lecture, but we've talked about it throughout the class. And validity is the extent to which you're measuring what you think you're measuring. So if your tool is a little bit off, or your definition is a little bit off, then your results might not necessarily be valid. And what happens here is that this can limit the whole field and produce what we call black box work. So we have these results where we say we're changing people's condom use, but if our tool was inaccurately measuring condom use, then we're kind of leading the whole field astray by telling people that our study worked when really it didn't actually change condom use in the way that people think that it did. I just have this little graphic here showing the mystery that can happen in behavioral measurement and behavioral interventions. A lot of the times people say, oh, we did this intervention, it was a health education intervention, and condom use changed as a result of it, but we don't really talk about measurement and our strategies, and that can lead people astray. So as I talked about, there are 3 kind of steps in behavioral measurement. And the first one is creating a definition for your behavior. So you need to determine what counts as a case or a behavioral occurrence before you can even plan your measurement strategy. So before you can plan your study design or your evaluation, you need to know exactly what you're looking for. So if you are targeting breastfeeding among mothers with HIV, you need to know exactly how you're defining breastfeeding. So your definition in a behavior should specify who is doing the behavior, what exactly are they doing, how much of it are they doing, how many repetitions, and how long do they have to do it for, and then when or under what circumstances do they need to engage in the behavior. And poor definitions lead to poor measurement. So here's an example of a definition of a behavior or a measurement of it gone wrong. So you're trying to decrease teen pregnancy, and you write on your survey for teenagers, how often do you use a condom during sex? What's the problem with this? There's a number of problems with this. We don't get at what type of sex. So a teenager could interpret this as, I use this during vaginal sex, but maybe not anal sex. This definition does not explain the duration of sex. So maybe they wear a condom for a part of the sexual encounter and then take it off and discard it. Then does that meet the definition of how if them using a condom? It also doesn't give them an explanation of the right way to use a condom. So maybe teenagers are saying, yeah, I use a condom every time I have sex, but they're doing it totally wrong, and they're still at risk for pregnancy, STD transmission. So the way that we've worded here and defined the behavior for our participants using this self-reported survey measure has a lot of flaws in it and could lead us to false results. So this goes back to what I was talking about earlier about how if we were to report, we did a health education study, and we asked teenagers this question before the study and after the study, and we showed a difference. This is kind of an example of that black box and low validity. Because of our bad definition, we can't really say with certainty that appropriate condom use increased during sex and that it increased over all of the situations that we want it to increase. So hopefully that makes sense. So here's another example. So a bad definition of exercise would be exercising 3 times a week for 30 minutes. So I've come up with a better definition. The definition would be complete a cardiovascular activity, for example, walking, cycling, or vacuuming, for 30 continuous minutes on 3 separate days of the week, maintaining a heart rate of 140 through 160 beats per minute. So hopefully you can see that this second definition is so much better than the first one. If you were to ask people, how often do you exercise for 30 minutes at a time, your responses are going to get a wide variety. There's going to be a wide variety in responses, and you're not really going to know if people are reporting what you want them to report. So the second definition gives much more specific details about exactly what you want people to report. So the last slide in this segment before we break, I'm going to have you create a good definition of a behavior. So here's the bad definition: using a condom during sexual activity. What I want you to do is rephrase this definition. Write a good definition of condom use during sexual activity, one that if you ask somebody, you're going to get the exact answer that you need to get about them using a condom during sexual activity. Your definition can include pictures, videos, words, whatever you need to clearly define what condom use during sexual activity is. So you'll post that to the discussion board on Blackboard and then move on to the next video.